Testing 1, 2, 3. Who's your daddy? Testing 1, 2, 3. I'm your daddy. God damn it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. And the truth shall set you free.
All right, I'm just going to jump into it. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine.
We're recording. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Face the Truth. I'm excited about this one. So I've been doing, you guys all know, I've been doing the comedy thing for a while now. And I've had a few comedians on the podcast because for me, this podcast is all about the arts, whether it's painting, drawing, sculpture, poetry. I've had everything you can think of on the podcast. Obviously, one of my favorite things is comedy because that's something I'm really into. And I love and enjoy having different comedians on because everyone, we're all very similar in some ways, but then we're all different in many other ways. Depending on how we create, how we write, our process, our thinking behind things. So I find it really interesting just to talk to different comedians and hear their perspective on things. So I'm very excited. This comedian, I've known him for a couple of years now. We met. Well, we can talk about that stuff a little bit later. But anyways, I really enjoy hanging out with him. I think he's a really funny guy. He's a producer. He puts on some really cool shows. He's also one of the best hosts. In fact, just recently won best host of the year for the Burbies or whatever. Is that what it's called? The Burbies?
Yeah, it's called the Burbies, and don't even bother Googling it because it's not a
it's on Google.
It's not an industry recognized award, but yeah, I won it.
If you tell someone that you won a Burbie, basically you're gonna get laid. That's how it works. It's very
no. It didn't work.
Oh, okay, no, okay. But anyways,
because it kind of kills the mood when you have to spend 10 minutes explaining what the fuck a Burbie is.
Exactly. It reminds me of the Dundies, from The Office. But anyways, everyone, please put your hands together for the one and only Mr. kylealan. This is a cool thing my daughter just got for Christmas.
I like it.
Should do the whole thing like this.
It looks like it has more production value than my award.
Yeah. This was my burpee.
God
anyways.
damn it.
Oh, here she comes to get it. She heard me. Here's her microphone. God. Here you go. No, shut the door. I'm talking to someone. Good, go. Shut the door. We'll edit that in post.
Or you can keep it in.
Yeah. I thought she would hear that. She's like, she's obsessed with it. But anyways, it's so great to have you on, man. I've been wanting to have you on for a while, just to talk about stuff. So, but anyways, before we get into it, how's it going, man? It's freaking freezing today, isn't it?
It is. And I have to say, I appreciate you having me on here because it gives me a reason to get dressed up at 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah. I was wondering if you were going to have a shirt on or the bandana,
Yes,
you never know.
Yes. I got all that. And I was even debating on putting on shoes at one point.
Do you know who David Lucas is?
I can't say that I do, at least not right off the bat.
So he's like a comedy store comic that's been building his way up. And he, about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, he became a regular on the Kill Tony show.
Okay.
And I met him there when I was there at the comedy store, I think in 2018 or something like that. But anyways, I had him, and now he's actually opening for Louis C.K. So he's like opening for him. So he's doing okay, But I had him on my podcast a while ago, and he did it with his phone. He had no shirt on, didn't bother to get dressed. Just laid on his stomach and was smoking a bong. Like, I'd be in the middle of talking to him and he'd be like the bong smell, and then the whole screen be full of smoke. And then Yeah, that it was a fun interview.
Did he ask you if he could take his pants off too?
I don't know if I don't know if they
Did
were
he
on.
block the doorway?
It was really funny though. I was like, yeah, okay. Cool guy though. But anyways, so the way I normally do this is just free form, like just conversation. So if you it's a back and forth thing. So if you want to just talk about whatever, that's fine. But I do have some things I was curious about because so the interesting thing about stand up is a lot of people probably, I mean, I don't know if the regular people understand what the kind of work it is, and what we end up doing is it's like a lot of just, getting up at mics and just trying and trying and trying. It's not just about shows. There's a lot that goes into it. And we, as comics, we end up like, hanging out with each other quite a bit and seeing each other do the same bits over and over again, or developing them, adding to them, watching them grow. But another thing about it is like you start to get to, or think you get to know a little bit about someone just by their material, because we do kind of expose a lot of truths, but at the same time, we embellish things, we exaggerate, we whatever. And so
Yes.
in some way, I feel like I know you really well, but then otherwise I'm like, I don't know how much of what you say is true or not, or you know what I mean? So that's one thing I find it's interesting. I like that. It's fun to talk to comics about that kind of a
Well,
thing.
yeah, there's this whole thing of like a false sense of intimacy that definitely exists amongst the realm of stand-up comedy, where our material may either be an exaggeration of our actual selves, or it is a reflection of ourselves too. But even so, like, I think that what's more important is if it's true in the artistic sense, not so much whether it's actually reflective of the person on stage.
Right.
So, yeah. And I know there's been like quite a few times where comics were judged as a person just because their material, even though that material is a character.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like the first instance that comes to mind, of course, like Andrew Dice Clay, when he first started getting controversy, that whole Dice character, it's a character. I mean, it's not him as a person, although he did kind of become that person later on. But that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, it's like you can't really use like a comics act to actually like, gauge their actual personality off stage, because
Yeah.
it's an act. It's meant to entertain.
Yeah. Which is so funny that so many people right now with this whole cancel culture try to go after comics, and it's like the whole point of it is to say ridiculous shit. Like
I think comedians are just like the perfect target for anyone who is part of that cancel culture witch hunt mob,
yeah.
whatever people want to call it nowadays. Because a lot of stand-up comedy, when you take it out of context, sounds really dodgy at best. So yeah, it's if anything, it's a perfect target.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny too, like I have people in my family who have heard bits, or and they're like, oh, you should never say that. You should not, that's not even something you should talk about. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever say that. Like, and it's fine. I don't really listen to what they say because they don't get it. But it's just funny how, I know the jokes that they're talking about when I do them at a real show, they kill. They do great.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that when you hear it this other way, it's like I've got family members that say things like, there are certain things you should just never ever talk about, and I believe everything should be able to be talked about, and that's what one of the challenges I think is there are, obviously, there are certain categories that are just terrible, whether it be like rape or whatever else. But I think a lot of comedians try, like, obviously we don't condone those things, we don't think they're awesome, but like it's almost like that creative challenge in a way of, how can I take this taboo topic and like do something creative with it and really original, because it's hard to be original with with something like that as well. But
Yeah,
like,
what comic has not talked about rape at this point?
yeah, it's like, but it's funny. I mean, obviously, a lot of people, because it's a terrible thing, obviously, but
Yeah, of course.
but there's but there are ways to, I guess I don't even know how I'm trying to say it. Like, it's just like, I think a way, like, not just for us, but for audience members to be able to laugh at things that are terrible kind of helps you, cope with those things or think about them differently. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not something where you should be taking it verbatim, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's,
Yeah.
I think, a tricky line. Like, how do you, like, when, like, what is your thought process or your writing process where when you start thinking about a topic, or like, do you start writing with a goal in mind for a certain bit, or do you kind of just, things just come and you kind of like just play with it and see what happens?
Yeah, there basically isn't a one-way process with how I go about things as far as like mining material and trying to write materials. Like sometimes there's like a certain subject where it's on my mind. I'll try to think hard about like how to make jokes of it. And sometimes like I just rely on observations that just kind of happen by chance.
Yeah.
And then that will spark some inspiration that will form into a joke. So there is no particularly one true way of doing it, at least in my
Hmm.
world, because usually my writing process, like it's split between actually physically writing it down on paper, and then other times it's just me talking to myself in my car because I like doing that because that way I can have a proper cadence for my jokes.
Hmm.
When I was starting out, I had a problem that my jokes were a bit too verbose because I came from a bit of a writing background. So yeah, they were a bit too wordy. So that's why like I moved into the writing process of just like talking out loud because that way I could sound more conversational and I can have a proper cadence and actually I can know how it sounds because the thing that jokes that most people don't know about is that a good joke has a rhythm to it.
Hmm.
And you want to make sure you have the certain amount of words and a certain vocabulary in order to fulfill a good rhythm.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's an interesting way, because there's also there. I mean, there's so many. That's why what's interesting about comedy is like it's very subjective too. Like, there's so many. I mean, there's also like storytelling comedians who don't, because your stuff is a lot like a setup punch, but you have,
Yeah, that's essentially how I got started was doing
yeah,
set punch because that was when I started doing comedy, I sucked. Much like a lot of people, we didn't. Most people don't really understand that when you're doing stand up, it is all rooted in joke structure. Because
hmm,
I know, like watching George Carlin and Lucy Kay back in the day, I didn't see it as jokes. That seemed like just stories and rants and kind of like philosophy of sorts. But no, there is joke structure rooted in everything. You just got to analyze it.
yeah,
So, set punchline, one liner type thing. That was what I started learning, and then I kind of kept to that, just doing like the set punchline, just getting the quickest laugh possible. And then eventually, I started like incorporating more storytelling aspects into it, some act outs here and there too. So yeah, it's still a process. I'm still learning
oh yeah.
different new things to incorporate into my stand-up act.
You do really well with mixing, I think, storytelling with like a setup punch, which
Well,
is a good thing.
I think with storytelling, and this is why I tell people that who are trying to become a storyteller, is that I don't really consider a story in comedy a story. I just think of it as a series of jokes in narrative format.
Hmm.
I think it's Christopher Titus who used to have a process where he would write out a story for whatever one man show he's doing, and then once he's written the entire story out, then he will go back and write jokes in between, and that's sort of like how I approach it too. Is like when you're telling a story, you gotta find ways to make it interesting. I don't believe in telling a story the dry way, which most people do, which you just tell a continuously long story that is basically dependent on the last part being worthwhile. I like to
Yeah,
make little jokes along the way.
yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that's why like a lot of new comics they like to go into storytelling because everyone has a funny story. But what most people don't realize is that funny story really is only funny in front of their own social group. So that's
Mhm.
why I think writing jokes along the way comes a long way in order to be an effective storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, like I agree with you. Like for the storytelling type jokes like that, there's like ideas that, oh, this is a really funny idea. But
Yeah.
if you can like pepper in every 10 seconds or so some kind of a joke in that story, and that's the kind of interesting thing is I would say, like for me, like I try to like write out the idea because I know this punchline is going to land. But
Mhm.
then there's this much space in between where it's like, well, can't just talk that whole time without, there's got to be something to make people entertained and laugh in there.
And
Um,
there are comics who do that. I mean,
yeah.
there is definitely a way to be done of it because I know like Mike Birbiglia does a lot of those one man shows where he does have a lot of moments where he's spelling jokes. A lot of it is sort of like building up the story and like because he's doing a different type of comedy, that one man show thing. It's sort of like it's more in common with theater than typical stand up. So it's almost you're
Mhm.
trying to make a dramatic showpiece of your act.
Yeah.
So I think that's like one application where storytelling comes into play.
It's interesting because like did you see Neil Neil Brennan's Blocks, the new thing on
Not yet.
Netflix?
Not yet, unfortunately. Haven't gotten the chance yet.
Because it's like I feel it's interesting because I think that he's a brilliant writer, and
Absolutely.
it was very creative, and I was really entertained. But it was interesting because there was a lot of I liked it better than his three mic thing. I thought the three mic thing was a little weird to be honest, but this one it had a lot more jokes, but it was cool because he was really pulling from personal emotional things. Like it was almost felt like a humorous essay in a way. So he
Mhm.
was kind of telling a lot of truths and story about himself, using these blocks as like visuals to keep it interesting and creative. But it was a little bit strange at the end. I still loved it. At the very end, there's like a really cool payoff that he does with the blocks. I won't ruin it for anybody. But it got so serious all of a sudden at the very end, like real serious. And
Right.
and it kind of ends that way. And it's weird. I'm like I don't think there's like a right or wrong way. And I think that overall it's a very brilliant special, but at the same time if it does feel strange because like the way I think about stand up, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, is like especially when you're doing a show, is like you want to try to start off with a bang, you know, and like get people going right away, get them on your side, get them to like you and relate, and then have your filler stuff, and then you want to end with a bang, you know. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I think of it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I can't compare myself to Neil Brennan. I'm just saying that I just thought it was interesting. I mean, I really love his special, but it almost feels strange, I think, in a way to like end with a point where like, oh no, is he gonna cry? Is everybody gonna cry? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's kind of but I mean, it is interesting. And I guess with so many comedy specials coming out like every 10 minutes, I mean, it's definitely one that stands out from a bunch of them. So I guess in that way, it was pretty successful, you know?
And this is like my personal opinion in regards to specials like that. I appreciate those types of specials that incorporate like such a emotional story arc toward the end
Mm-hmm.
and where it's tugging at the heartstrings of the audience and playing into like the whole like emotional aspect to it. But that's not really like the type of stand up I really gravitate towards. I like the ones where it's just set punchline, get the laughs, that
Yeah.
type of comedy. I like that sort of thing. Because going back to Mike Birbiglia, for instance, like my favorite work by him was his early stuff, particularly the album Two Drink Mike, which that is just all set punchline material. It's great. Now I like some of the storytelling stuff he does, but it's not really something I gravitate towards. Do I believe that you can make an emotional connection with the audience and be vulnerable with them? Absolutely. But if I had to pick or choose, I'd probably go with the ones that just more focused on straight ahead jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as like Neil Brennan's work, I mean, I like Three Mics, but I also like his other albums he released before. I don't remember the names of them. I remember listening to them on Spotify, but
Yeah.
they're great.
He's a brilliant writer, man.
Absolutely.
He's so like, yeah, I really like his stuff a lot. But yeah, you definitely should watch it. It's really good. And like I said, there's a payoff at the end that's like, as an artist, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Right.
But it's funny too, just like it's weird. I don't know if you saw Michael Che's last special, but that was another one that ended really weird. Did you see that one? Where he's sitting on the chair the whole time. And,
that one I haven't. No.
Oh, that one's a weird one because the entire special he's just sitting on this chair, and it's not a very long one. I think it's like 30 minutes. And then at the very end, he tells like this joke that's not funny, and it's kind of sad. And then you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. And then he goes, I think I'll just end it right there. And he just gets up and that's it. You're like, what? It was the weirdest way to end a special.
It's ballsy.
Yeah. You got to watch
because like in the other end, that could be like a really emotional stamp to seal the deal on your work. But at the same time, it can also be a very awkward, abrupt end.
It was
which
weird.
which could be a bit of a disjointed way to end things. And also, I want to clarify this right now. I really don't watch a lot of upcoming specials. I know, like it's sinful of me to even say that, but there's so many content that comes out, especially on Netflix, and especially now with YouTube, where it's home to a lot of other comics like uploading specials. It's just too much for me to keep up at times, and also too, like I don't really like watching specials sometimes. Instead, I'd rather just see the comic live.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Like, I would say, like, if you're a comic or a comedy fan, if you want to like experience true comedy, is like, yeah, the specials are nice and all that. They're convenient because you can watch them in your own home, but like I feel like the true essence is in the club or in the theater where you're experiencing it live. Because, of course, like with specials with a huge production to them. Not all of them have this, but some of them have a little bit of like a shine and polish to them, which may not be like what the show was actually like in person. So that's why I like seeing it live.
No, that's true. I saw I love Jessica Kirson, and I love her latest special. It's really good, but I saw her live at Zany's like a year ago, and it was just like mind blowing, like so much more powerful, and just it was awesome.
Like I remember I saw Joey Diaz the night before he did his first hour special at Zany's Rosemont. And
oh wow.
I remember during the show he was killer. He was great. And then I watched the special, it's like he's funny, but he definitely lost a lot of that spontaneity that made that first show so great.
Like they edited it out, or he just did it differently that time?
He did it differently because it was his first special, so you had to make sure it was more structured. But Joey Diaz, he's just funnier when he's himself and not adhering to a structure.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Kyle Allan, let's go back yonder a few years. Now I don't know much about your personal life, but you have brothers or sisters?
I have one younger sister.
Younger sister. And where did you guys grow up?
So we've essentially lived our whole lives in the south suburbs of Chicago, and that's going amongst different towns around that area, but essentially south suburbs of Chicago.
Okay.
So yeah, that's essentially where we've grown up and pretty much stayed our whole life.
And what I'm curious about, like what your childhood, like what kind of things were you into when you were a kid that like led you, do you think, to doing comedy?
To be honest, like in regards to comedy, I didn't really consider doing comedy until I was much older. So in my childhood, it never came to mind. I mean, I was never really like I guess I was a bit of a class clown from here for certain times, but I was always a pretty good student, pretty astute learner, and well behaved. I was very socially awkward, so I guess that lent itself to stand-up comedy.
Well, I mean, you had no interest at, like, you didn't watch like Eddie Murphy or anything growing up and think, oh, that's fucking awesome? Like you never, that kind of stuff?
Not so much when I was a kid, but when I was in my late teens, like that's when I started listening to George Carlin. I think that George Carlin is the greatest comedian of all time and still one of my absolute favorites. And I remember like me and my buddy, we would watch like clips of his stand up, like even like stuff from the 70s and the 80s, because like George Carlin was an anomaly that even like stuff talked about like 30 years ago is still somewhat relevant to this day and age. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, he's brilliant, man. So
Yeah.
but I know that you went to eventually went to school for like music. So were you more into music as a kid growing up?
I was, especially in high school. That's when I started playing guitar. That's why I was taking it a little bit more seriously. Then, then I went to community college, joined a jazz band. I was not a good jazz player. I might add that I was
Yeah.
not good at it. But then I went to another music school, Roosevelt University, and then I just sort of fell out of it because I realized that spending thousands and thousands of dollars at music school isn't going to guarantee me a career.
Yeah.
And then like I realized that there is not much point to it. So then I dropped out for a little bit, started writing. I was part of this production team. We were trying to do like internet reviews that didn't really pan out so well. We even talked about doing a movie. I wrote a script for that, all 90 pages of it. And then nothing worked out. And then I got tired of working in a dead end team environment. So I just decided to do stand up because at that point I started watching a lot of Louis C.K., Hannibal Buress, Mark Maron, Anthony Jeselnik. So then I was interested in that. Then I did it.
That's interesting. So what? So you're that's interesting. So you went from basically because you were trying seriously to do stuff with the music. Are you still
Yeah.
do you still write at all music, or is it kind of just something you don't really
I
do
still
much?
play guitar a lot. In fact, I was playing guitar before this interview. But yeah, like, do I still write music? I mean, here and there, but I don't
Mhm.
really take it seriously. If anything, I'm just a bedroom guitar player.
Yeah, me too. See,
Yeah.
um, now I used to do the whole band thing myself for many years, but so getting into comedy, uh, did you find that like like comedians like Louis C.K., um, Hannibal Buress, and those different people you mentioned, but did you feel inspired watching them? Like, oh, I could do that, or was it like, I mean, like, how did? Because the way you just said that seemed very abrupt. Like, oh, I just started doing stand up. Is that really kind of what you
It
did? You just was like,
it kind of was abrupt because I
oh, okay,
remember like for the 6 months of starting stand up, I didn't really tell a lot of people about it. And then when I was more comfortable with letting people know that I do this, it was kind of a shock to some people because they know me as a guy who played guitar, who was deep into music, then suddenly made a complete 180 into comedy and basically like in an entirely new environment. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock.
hmm.
But yeah, like I think what sort of like prompted me in considering it was being introduced to Lucy K because like I said, George Carlin was the first comic I loved and all that. But then I started watching Louis, and what I loved about his stuff was he had a similar cynical bite like Carlin did, but he also showed a lot of vulnerability. There
Hmm.
was a lot of self-deprecating material, and I felt that spoke to me in a way because I kind of related to some of that. And then with Louis, I started to jonesing for more comedy. So I was, looking into his contemporaries like Hannibal Buress, Mark Maron, so on and so forth.
That's so interesting. That's very similar to me in a way because but I mean, the difference is like I always wanted to do comedy. Like I was just always very interested. Like ever since I was a little kid, Bill Cosby, um, who everyone's afraid to talk about now. But
Well, I just mentioned Louis C.K. a while ago,
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. But I mean,
I know it's a completely different thing, much worse, might I add.
yeah. Um, so this is just to let you know, this we got 10 minutes on this, and then we'll start over, or not over,
Okay.
but continue. But anyways, I like I always wanted to do it, but like I said, like Louis C.K., but I was always into like SNL. Like when I was a kid, like in high school, I had a daily routine, which I would watch Johnny Carson show with my dad, mostly for the comedy, and then I would
Yeah.
watch Letterman, and then I became a huge into Conan O'Brien. Like Conan O'Brien was like my favorite because he was just so wacky and out there and crazy. I was really big into like Monty Python, and I would always. And then when I was in high school, I was like on improv teams and different stuff, and I just really wanted to do comedy. But I had no idea how to. From North Wisconsin, like I had no idea what to do. And then when I moved to Chicago, I just focused on my art and music and but I always wanted to do comedy. I remember even when I went to art school, there was a kid in the school and I overheard him talking about how he's a stand-up comedian. And I remember thinking, no way, that guy's so cool. Like that's what I want to do. Like, but I just never I didn't know what to do, you know. But
Yeah,
I
there
think
isn't.
that Louis C.K., like after years of me wanting, I remember like Louis C.K. was my favorite comedian. And just like what you were saying, like I just felt like when I listened to his material, I felt like it was like I've had those same thoughts so many times. Like, and then that's when I started realizing like, man, maybe I could do this somehow. And that's, before I had the opportunity with Steve Byrne, I started just like writing a lot. Cause I was like, so for like a few years, I was flirting with the idea of just doing it, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I was so clueless about the whole open mic thing in Chicago. Like I
Yeah.
didn't realize you could. Like I remember like, don't do you have to get material first and then you just try to like show up at the Laugh Factory and see. Like I didn't know that you. Oh no, you go to these mics and you. I wish I would have known that like years before.
Yeah.
Um,
Most people are clueless about the open mic scene. Then when they do
yeah.
comedy for the first time, they wish they still remain clueless about the open mic scene.
Yeah. Well, especially like a lot of the mics. Like I've found like a lot of the mics I went to in the city, they were okay, but it wasn't until I started hitting mics in the burbs where I was like, oh, this is way different vibe. And like a lot more like regular people come to the mics at burbs. And so it's not just other comics, you know. That was
Not
what I
all the
experienced.
time, but yeah, I have noticed that in particular that in the suburbs of Chicago, like mics typically have a little bit more regular audience members in the midst than just purely comics, which in the north side of Chicago, that's pretty much what it is most of the time.
Yeah. But I mean, every comics experience when they first start is going to be a little bit like, I don't know about this.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But that's what
Absolutely.
you stick with it, you stick with it. And it's, um, I don't know. But the one thing, I don't know how you feel about this, but I mean, the one thing that I really enjoy about the whole stand-up thing is, and we can get to, I want to get in more with this with you in a little bit, but like, obviously I have goals and different things that I hope for and want to do.
I can't
Um,
relate.
um, you can't, well, that's what I was going to ask you next, but like, I mean, but one of the things I enjoy about stand-up is the open mic scene because there's a few reasons. For one, I enjoy just working on my material and getting it better and better and better, so that the next time I have a show, I feel great and ready to rock. And the more you work on a certain bit, you start to get new tags and different things, and you start building and just building up your act a little bit more and more. But I also really love that scary feeling of never saying something before and you have an idea and you're like, I can't wait to get up there and just try it and see what happens. And sometimes it doesn't work. But I try not to take it too personal. I'm like, well, I know there's something there, so I'm going to keep figuring it out. But then when it does work, like, oh man, I feel like I got something new that I can build on. but then the third aspect of what I love about it is just the community of friends and comics, because it's almost like a weird, I mean, I'm not trying to compare us to soldiers in war, but it's like, it feels like, you know, we're it's a rough thing and a fun thing and a challenging thing, but only us get it. And it's almost like a brotherhood that I find really enjoyable. And I'm so glad that I've got so many awesome friends through this, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I could definitely agree with the whole Soldiers of War thing, except for I equate us to Soldiers of War that were all dishonorably
Rejected.
discharged,
Yeah.
that were all
Like,
court-martialed, and
yeah.
maybe some of them were investigated for friendly fire. You know, that's a whole other thing.
Sticking weird objects up our asses, like like you
To
gotta
each their
go.
own.
Yeah.
I mean, when the C4 says in front of enemy first, I mean, you gotta try that out, see what that really means.
Yeah. I like that. That's good. Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I would say.
Yeah, I think. But
Uh,
you were talking about how you really loved the whole fear that comes with trying out new material, and it's an exhilarating feeling, but I would say it takes a while before you can actually love that feeling, because when you're starting out, it essentially is a fight or flight instinct.
mhm.
And you got adrenaline pumping 100%, your blood is flowing, you're very confused, you don't know how it's going to go down. It's a pretty unnerving feeling. So you gotta like do it enough times before you can actually like cope with the adrenaline.
Yeah. But and I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about it is, like, I think that you need to be confident. Even if you don't feel confident, you need to be confident, and believe in believe in what you want to talk about, know what you want to talk about, and be confident. Because I feel what I've learned anyways is, I think the audience can tell right away when you're not confident, and once that happens, that you can go, it can go bad.
Yeah,
but I do like that challenge of it. I do like that, because the one thing I think for me anyways, and I don't know how you feel, but like, doing stand up, it really puts me out of my comfort zone. Even though I do feel natural when I'm on stage, it still is very uncomfortable. And I kind of like that, because I think it pushes me to be more creative and try things, and it feels so good when you do it, when you're done, when you know, like, oh, I did it, you know, I can be better. I'm going to be better. You know, that's how I mean, that's the way I feel about it anyways. I don't think everyone's exactly the same way, but
no, let's be honest. There's some people that no matter how many times they get up on stage, they just don't get better.
yeah,
People might have even said that about me at one point too. But you know, it's some people develop differently. And what I mean by that is that some people grow and some just don't. I think having some self-awareness comes a long way for this, because you gotta put aside your ego and actually like analyze what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And sometimes what you're doing wrong outweighs what you're doing right. And you gotta make peace of that, and you gotta fix it.
that's true. It's all right. We're back. Cool. So I have a few more questions I thought of. I have wild monkeys in the house here. So we were talking about like your comedy, how you started. I was curious, like, how long ago now? How long have you been doing it?
So I started in September 29th, 2015. I remember that date exactly.
Wow.
So it's been about over 7 years now.
Wow. It's like, I think that's like almost exactly 4 years. I think I started September 20th something of 2019.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And where do you remember which place it was that you tried the first
Yes, I
time?
do. It was at Riddle's Comedy Club in Allsip, Illinois. I
Ah,
have a soft spot for that place. A lot of good times there. It's a bit of a rough spot though. But so
Yeah.
the first open mic went like this. I remember like the weeks prior to it, I went to the open mic just to watch, just so I can get a lay of the land and also see what other people are doing. And then the day came where I did my very first set, and I decided that I was going to um, be edgy and original.
Go. Go. I'm recording. Go. And shut the door. Go. And just ignore the person behind the curtain.
Okay, now that the child is out of the room, I did my
Yeah.
first set about masturbation.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. That was that's my producer. So
Yeah, I did my first set about masturbation because I wanted to be a rogue, and Louis C.K. was my biggest idol, and that wasn't going to blow up in my face anytime soon.
oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah,
Well, I had
I
some
think
variety.
I think everyone's first joke is about that.
Either about that or sex, and they always equate to the first time doing sex or whatever. Doing
Yeah.
sex
Doing
goes to show you how my sex life is going. I did that sex a while ago.
Do breasts feel like a bag of sand? Do they? It just feels like a bag of sand. You know what I'm talking
In my
about?
case, it feels more gravelly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but Riddles, that's the first place. So, yeah, that's interesting. I only have one experience at Riddles, and it was a show. But I've heard the mic like mostly good things about the mic. They're still doing mics there. I haven't been to a mic though. But so how do you feel like that you did in your first time? Were you pumped about it, or were you like, ooh?
I actually was kind of pumped about it the first time because there was some people that actually did laugh at what I was saying. And I remember on the day of, I decided to write some more jokes because, I thought, the whole masturbation topic is a little tired and cliche. So I started searching for more original content. So I threw a Hitler joke in there because that has not been tapped yet. And I remember right after my set, the host goes up and says, "Bro, you did a whole set about masturbation jokes and Hitler puns. You are the stereotype of a first timer."
Yeah.
But it was still a good experience. I mean, I remember I tried listening to that recording, and
I actually had tears coming out of my eyes just now.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
So funny.
But yeah, I remember I tried listening to my recording because I even had the sense to record my first set on on audio at the very least, not like a video recording.
Yeah.
And I could not understand what the fuck I was saying because I was so hyped that I was just speaking a million words per minute. And also, I have pretty bad enunciation as it is. Like, that was something I also had to work on along the way. So it was just a garbled mess of bullshit.
Yeah. But somehow you were like, you felt good enough about it that you're like, I think I can try this again. Like, because that's the thing. It's like, it's funny. I think you brought it before. Like, there's some people that just never seem to get better, and there's some people that I'm surprised, like they're still going for it. And then there's people that are like, every once in a while, there's someone that's never done it before, and they're like, God, that was good. Like, God damn. But like each one of us has to have some kind of, I guess I don't know what your rule is for things, but like I kind of feel like, if it makes me laugh, there's not that I have like the ultimate say on what's funny, but I feel like if like an idea, if there's something that makes me laugh, there's got to be something funny there. And my job then is how do I pull this off so other people also think it's funny. But and I also feel like I only really try to talk about what I know. Like what is real to me from my perspective, instead of trying to just pick a topic that's popular and just try to make jokes up about it or something. It doesn't ever work that way for me.
You can do that, especially if you write some good killer jokes about it, then yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I'm
But
saying
the
for
problem,
me, I just have a hard time like I it has to be more of organic. Like it kind of just comes to me somehow.
right?
Like
And
the
also, I don't particularly recommend, especially when you're starting out, deciding to write jokes about current subjects because, for one, if it's like very current and very relevant, chances are other people have talked about it in the way that you're about to talk about it. And especially like when you watch like late night shows, uh, if you go between like the different like shows, you'll see like how often those
oh yeah.
premises and jokes get recycled. And
Hmm.
it's not because they're stealing off one another, it's just parallel thinking. And
Hmm.
especially when something is that relevant, people are trying to think in a certain comedic way.
Yeah, that's true.
And also another big thing why I don't think it's wise to focus on writing more relevant jokes is because it has a shelf life. And I feel like if you're going to do a joke about a current topic, do it to the point where you can hone it and then make a clip and then upload it on Instagram or whatever, and then there. Because in a few months or so, that joke's not going to be as funny and relevant anymore.
Yeah. No, I remember I've had jokes like that before, like that I knew when I was doing it that this is only going to work for a couple weeks and then it's going to be like
Yeah.
when uh what's his name shot that person
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin. Like I had a pretty good Alec Baldwin joke, and for a couple weeks it just killed. I would just open with it, but then after
Yeah.
about 3 weeks, I'm like, it's just old news now. But it's still a funny joke. But it's just now it's like, eh. But like, I remember the first night I was like, oh, and just the same thing you just said about like late night things, like how Jimmy Fallon and like Stephen Colbert or something, they'll have like very similar bits because of a certain topic. When I went to do my bit that night, I was just like, it was at a mic. I wanted to try it. I'm like, oh, I bet you someone else is gonna, because it seemed like such an obvious joke to me. But I remember no one said anything about it. When I did it, it was great. I was like, oh yes. But I also knew this is like this baby's gonna be aborted real soon. It's not gonna last long.
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
And there is no like worse feeling than um having a joke, you write it out, you hash it out, you hone it, it kills, and then you find out that there was already an internet meme with pretty much the same exact content that you just told on stage.
yeah.
It's like, well, fuck.
Yeah. I remember a friend of ours. I won't mention his name, but I remember we were hanging out once after some mic, and I don't know if it was you or someone, and it was like, I've seen memes of that. It's like,
Yeah, I know who we're talking about, and yes, I was the one who had the unfortunate job to show him the meme.
yeah. But you know what? At least be encouraged that your brain, you got a funny brain, and you were thinking along the right way. But like, there's a joke that I really, really like that I wrote, and I like it a lot, and I've only done it a few times live, and every time I've done it, it's done really well. But then I found I was listening to a comedian, and I realized that he has a bit almost like very similar enough that I shouldn't do it anymore because he's famous and
Yeah,
he's got his bit already out there. I might have wrote mine first, but he's out there famous doing huge clubs. It's like, well, I can't do that bit now. You
right.
know, it's just one of those things. But it's still one of those jokes where I'm like, I've tried, like, is there a different way I could do it? And it's like, no, it's just still it's too similar.
Sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and kill your darlings.
Yep, exactly. That's basically what I did. Um, da, 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 da. So, oh, we already talked about like some of your earlier influences. I was going to ask you, but like Carlin was a huge one, and Louis C.K. Who is someone that like current that you're really into, that you would say that you listen to a lot, or that you just really would love to see them live, maybe?
The one comic who I've been really getting into as of lately is probably Mark Norman because I just love
Mm,
how he writes jokes in such a very
Smooth.
it's such a smooth way, and also too is like it doesn't seem like that there is no fear with Mark Norman. He'll just joke about anything,
Mm-hmm.
and he just maintains that tone, and it's still disarming.
I agree, man. He's
So
one of
yeah,
my favorites. Yeah, he's
Tim
great,
Dillon
man.
is also one of my personal favorites too. Even though
Yeah.
like a lot of people will think that now he's more of a
A
podcast
podcaster.
guy more than a comedian, but I think his comedy is still great.
Yeah, I think so too.
Still one of the best current guys to do it.
One of my favorites the last year or so has been Shane Gillis. I really
Shane is
like.
great as well.
Yeah, I just like how he also doesn't give a crap, and he's just so naturally funny. Like even when he's just talking to the crowd, like he's just a funny dude. Um,
Yeah, he's
that's
one of the few guys who got canceled and actually benefited from it.
yeah. Oh yeah, big time. Um, there was somebody else. So like, I can't remember. I mean, obviously for me, anyways, Bill Burr. I think I love Tom Segura and Bill Burr are a couple of my favorites. But I uh, I got to see Bill Burr recently, and it was mind blowing because it was at the United Center, and I had nosebleed seats, but I was like up like on the top level, but looking directly straight across was the stage, and he was so little, but there was
Yeah.
like screens, so I could see him pretty good on the screens. And the thing that just blew me away was I'm forgetting who the opener was right now, but the opener was really good. He was a really good comic. He really just got everyone ready, and I remember just thinking like, wow, this guy's really good, and he was killing at the end, and all of a sudden Bill Burr's going to come out, and it was just crazy, like how quickly everyone forgot about that guy. Because when Bill Burr came out on stage, the energy, and right away he's pissed off and he's yelling about this and that, and it was just so funny. Like every single bit he had was just knocking it out of the park, and then towards I think he went like an hour and 25 minutes or something like that. And then the crazy thing is at the very end, he said, "Hey, I'm gonna finish with my final 15 here." And I was thinking in my head, 15 more minutes? This has been so long already. It didn't even feel like it felt like 5 minutes. And he told a story about doing mushrooms with his wife. They went away to something, but this story was so funny. There's like between I think 15 to 17,000 people in the stadium, and I remember just at one point being like, "This is just so iconic and epic what's happening right now." There's literally like maybe 17,000 people all crying, laughing together. Like
Yeah.
the stranger next to me like kept smacking my leg, and like I mean, it was just like this thing where everybody was like in the same wavelength, and it was just powerful. And it was just like I remember just thinking, this guy he is just magic. Like Bill
Yeah.
Burr, like I've never saw him live before. I've been a huge fan for years. And just like we were kind of full circle what we said before, the difference seeing him live was just levels. Like I remember just thinking too, like I'm trying to do this thing that he's doing, like uh
Yeah, that's why I say that watching him live is a better experience, especially in the case of Bill Burr, because Bill Burr's comedy style is mainly based on riffing. Now, there is an act, he does hone material, but then there's a lot of moments where he just goes off and like
oh,
off tangent rants,
yeah.
and he'll just go off in different directions, and he likes to riff. So that's why it's actually worth it to see him live, especially not just once, but also twice, because that way you get to compare how similar each performance was. They're not
Yeah.
very similar. They're
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, it was amazing, man. It was like and it was just amazing too, being in the United Center where thousands and thousands of people come to watch the Bulls or the Blackhawks, and yet we're all in this huge thing for this little teeny guy standing there on the stage. It's just like, what in the world? It's
Yeah.
amazing. So amazing, man.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That's the level that all of us strive for, but only 0.1% of us can actually achieve.
yeah.
So make of
Well,
that what you will.
that's actually, there's a couple things. That's actually something I was going to ask you soon. Is like, what what are your goals with comedy? Like, what are you wanting to do? Like, is there anything? I mean, of course, we all want to, take it to the next level. Um, but I mean, what is your, like, when you think about comedy and you think about you doing comedy, what are you hoping for and, I guess, aiming for?
Um, at first, at one point, I was thinking to myself, I wanted to get a blue check mark on Twitter, but then it turned out I could just buy that. So I guess we could like weigh that out.
Hmm.
As far as what I want in comedy is, and this is the one aspect where I feel like I lack in, is that I always approach stand up more through the artistic lens, not really so much focusing on the business end,
Hmm.
which um is a bit of a detriment for some regards, but that just meant that I focused more on the craft of writing and performing material. But I guess like my goal simply is just to do more. And that sounds like such a cop out answer. It's so basic, it's so plain, but it really is to do more. If I felt like
Hmm.
I was doing a lot of things this year, well, I got to double that. I got to do more.
Hmm.
And it's like whatever, I mean, that means double the bookings, double the exposure, putting my name out there, so on and so forth. Who knows? Maybe even record a special. Not that I really plan to do that right now. I mean, I would like to, but it hasn't come up as it recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like that's just really what it is. Like I feel like that whatever success and accomplishments that you've already built upon, you gotta do more. You gotta double, maybe triple that. It's always about the growth.
Yeah. That's the tricky part too, because like another question I had for you is like, because I feel like I deal with this a lot, and I don't know if you do, but like, what if any insecurities do you have about your own stand up, or just because I mean, for example, I'll give you an example for me. Like, um, one of the things that I find challenging is, you work. Well, some of us work really hard at it, and we, like what you said, I'm with you. I want to do more. I want to get on more things. I want to double things. I want to just get up more. I want to do more shows. But there's like this insecurity that can happen. I think it's really easy to get in your head creatively and just also just socially, where like, am I any good? Like, does are people like, I'm doing all these mics and I'm getting up, but like, did they do I suck? like, am
Yeah,
I?
there's a term for that. It's called Friday night. Friday night, you don't have a booking. The last couple open mics were kind of mid at best. You're struggling with material. You're going through writer's blocks. Like, fuck, why did I do this? Why couldn't I? Why couldn't I aspire to be an architect? But then, like, you write one good joke, then you get a couple more bookings, and then you feel like you're on cloud nine again, and then it just kind of like cycles. It's a very consistent up and down process.
Mm. So it's not just me. And you start. What happens to me too is, and I'm just being totally honest about this, is you start seeing your friends just getting booked on all kinds of things, and you're like, man, like, I feel like I'm there. Maybe I'm just terrible. Maybe, you know what I mean. But then all of a sudden you'll get something booked, and you're like, okay. But then you just see like certain friends just getting booked again and again, and like, what am I doing wrong? But I do feel like part of, and for me, I know not everyone's like this, but for me, I'm always happy for my friends. Like, I'm really happy that friends are getting up and getting shows. But at the same time, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And it does kind of push me a little bit. Like, I got to work harder. Because I have I guess a thought that goes through my mind a lot of instead of it's easy, I think, to feel sorry for yourself or to get yourself bummed out or whatever. And I think for me, what I try to tell myself is be undeniable. Like,
Yeah.
like that's my job. So don't worry about what's going on with other people, because that will fuck you up. Like,
Yeah,
be happy for
100%.
them, be happy for them, and then just work on yourself being undeniable, that like no one can deny, like, oh, this guy's funny.
If
And
you spend too much time focusing on what other people are doing, you're getting in the way of your own progress.
exactly.
Because if you're too focused on like what other people are doing, then yeah, you're not in the right headspace to actually write some new material, or maybe practice the stuff you already got, or maybe think of ways to improve your act. Instead, you're more focused on opportunities that other people are getting. And
Right.
the reality is like, good on those people for getting those opportunities, but it's not like it's going to propel them to stardom. It's it's all just like stuff that we overthink about, we overanalyze, and then we use that as sort of like ammunition to put ourselves down. And it's not necessary. It's totally
Yeah.
uncalled for. I feel like that there's a saying that cooler heads will prevail, and I feel like this also prevails. You gotta just be patient with yourself. You gotta be patient with the process. You gotta keep putting in the work, because
Yeah.
this isn't really a meritocracy per se, but if you keep putting the work in, people will notice. I mean, I
Yeah.
just won an award that probably cost about like less than $15 today, but guess what? I won it. The placard's a little crooked, but I won it.
Yeah, it's already starting to slide.
It's already starting. Oh, it's a fridge magnet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I guess my point with it is, I think part of I think in any kind of arts, doesn't matter really what it is. I believe that struggle is an important hurdle. Like, I think in order to succeed in anything, there's going to be struggle, and you have to be able to withstand it. And but like, I do think with comedy, a big part of it is that the internal head wars, it's a mental struggle, I think, sometimes, and especially like, if you're not feeling. Hold on a second. Sienna, you have to go. I'm recording. You're grounded. Get out. I'm recording. Get out of here. She's definitely grounded. Okay. But anyways, yeah, I think it is a mental struggle sometimes. And it's an interesting thing, because that adds already anxiety, or being vulnerable to something that already is, because you're putting yourself out there already by yourself. Like I was in bands for many years. I toured. I'm used to being on stage and performing and stuff. But man, it's a way different thing when you're the only one in the band and you're up there.
It is.
And there's so many aspects to it that are fun and exciting and challenging. But man, like, there's so much also emotionally that goes involved, because you really put yourself out there. And there's times, I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this, but like, you have a bad set, and that can just like haunt you until you get up again. You just kind of feel like, oh,
You feel like shit.
yeah.
I mean, bombing is part of the process, and honestly, it's healthy. It's sort of like a booster shot. It sucks, but it's good for you.
Yeah.
But of course, like, when it happens, you're not going to feel great about it. You're going to
Yeah.
feel really down on yourself. You're going to start doubting all the things that you've accomplished, and then you're going to belittle yourself. So, but it's necessary, because how else are you supposed to learn?
Yeah.
How else are you supposed to learn that what you said maybe wasn't the best way of saying things, or maybe it wasn't the best way to deliver, or maybe this bit just needs more work? You need to go through that. That's why I say, like, if anyone actually wants to do stand-up comedy, they either need to be very resilient and thick-skinned, or they just need to have a fetish for failure.
That's a great way to put it. And that was actually one of my last things I wanted to ask you is, because you've been doing it for a while, and you know, and a lot of comics look up to you because you're, first of all, you are a great host, but you also have like a natural. I've noticed with other comics, like you really are very helpful and open with things and talk with a lot of, like, especially newer comics about things. So what would you suggest or recommend to someone that's thinking about doing it or just starting or whatever? Like, what would you suggest? What's the best way for them to get started, I guess, or go about
Okay,
it?
so I'm gonna switch my tone to just address a hypothetical person listening right now who is thinking about doing stand-up. And I'm just gonna say to this person, just fucking do it.
Yeah.
I know it sounds very abrasive and sounds easy said no, but god damn it, just do it. Like, find out where there's a spot where there's like an open mic that you could go up and do comedy. Maybe get a lay of the land. Maybe see what this room is like. Maybe see what the people are like. Watch some comics, write some material, then go up and do it. Because trust me, the longer that you spend thinking to yourself, oh, one of these days, oh, I wish I could do it, you won't do it. Just
Yeah.
fucking do it. Trust me, we all eat shit the first time. I did my first set about fucking jerking off, for God's sake. It's like, it doesn't matter. The first time you go up on stage doesn't mean shit. It's all about how you keep going up on stage and then keep doing it and then build upon yourself. That's what makes you to a comic. That first time don't mean shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So quit being a pussy.
I wish my first time wasn't in a way. I mean, I have like love-hate relationship for the first time I did, because it was like at the Chicago Improv, basically. And so that's kind of a really weird first time to, I mean, I did 2 mics before that, but that was like, it's a very strange to do 2 mics, like being that fresh, and then all of a sudden come out and do 5 minutes at the Chicago Improv.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique situation.
But
I would imagine that not many comics can relate to that, but you know, that's still really cool.
but the cool thing about that experience was that, like, it threw me out. Like, I did well. I did well enough that I got to come back and do a couple more nights, and I just had, and all I had was that 5 minutes. That's all I had. So then I went.
Well, you had 5 minutes right from the get-go. That's impressive.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing: is that Steve Byrne asked me, and I've told this story in the podcast a lot, but he asked me to you know, he said you should do comedy, and I was like, I want to, but I don't know. And he's like, you know what? I want you to do a guest spot for 5 minutes for my show coming up in 5 months at the Chicago Improv. So I spent the next 5 weeks or so just working on trying to come up with 5 minutes, because I had to do 5 minutes. And I spent the entire time just like writing, throwing things away. And then a week before is the first time I actually went to a mic, and I only got to practice 3 minutes of it. So my first time really doing the full 5 minutes was in front of the Chicago Improv crowd.
Yeah.
So it's a different experience. But the interesting thing is, after that, then I just started hitting the mics, and all I had was that 5 minutes. And so I kept practicing that 5 minutes. But now I'm like, I went from the Chicago Improv to now I'm doing like these mics, and it was like such a different, everything was so different, but it pushed me to like keep writing and keep, you know, but like, I don't know how much material you have. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, but I started to realize really quick that, for me anyways, it takes a while to write material that I feel really good about. And I've been doing it for 3 years, but I've got maybe 38 minutes of material that I feel good about.
Right, and that's why I made that smart ass comment about, wow, you had 5 minutes, because like when you're starting out, like, you think you have 5 minutes, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, Like building a solid 5-minute set takes time and effort.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as you think. Like a solid 5-minute set can take months sometimes for some people.
Yeah. Well, it took me 5 months
Yeah.
of writing. But the thing about that is I did really well. And most of that 5 minutes I still use here and there in some of my bits, but I've changed them so much now. They've evolved so much. But like you, at least 2 of them were masturbation jokes.
Of course.
Of course. No,
Of course.
no Hitler though. But
that's a shame. You're missing out, man.
Yeah. In fact, the funny thing is when I went back in the green room, Joel Kagalan was hosting, and he gave me a high five because he knew it was my first time. He's like, dude, good job, man. And Steve was there, and I go, what did you think? And Steve's like, that was pretty good. He goes, maybe next time don't start with a masturbation joke. And then he asked me to come do the next couple nights, and I was like, oh, no way. So it was a cool experience, and it's because of that I'm even doing it anyways.
Yeah.
And then it was like a year and a half later that I did his show again, where you came to the show and he called on you to come on stage, which was really awesome. That was a really cool night because I literally met you the night before at CG's to try out my new 5 minutes that I was going to do for him.
Right.
And it was one of the only mics that I heard of that was doing 5 minutes for mics. And I was like, oh my God. So, and then the next night I see you there. I'm like, hey, dude, and then it was so funny because right away when Steve gets up, he picks on you because of the way that you were dressed and stuff. And he was like, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a comedian. He was like, oh, really? Come on up. And you came up and you did great. It was awesome. Like, I remember he was like surprised a little bit, like, wow, okay. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, that was an awesome night, man. That was really cool.
He made a callback to one of my jokes, so I thought that was a great honor.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we both got to share the stage at the Improv that night. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was so surreal because none of that was planned. Because Friday, that particular day that we shared the stage, I was supposed to be doing a show in Indiana, but then one of the comics on the show unfortunately passed away, so the show got rescheduled. So I didn't have a booking. So I heard Steve Byrne was coming through Schaumburg. I bought a ticket, and then that's when I ran into you. And of course, like, I met you the night before because you came to my open mic. I hosted the CG's open mic in Bolingbrook, and I was doing that for like 3.5 years or so. But yeah, then I was sitting close to the stage. Steve Byrne does a lot of crowd work. And of course, like, I was an easy target because me with my black denim jacket, beard and a bandana, like, maybe
you had the gloves. You had the gloves on too.
I put the gloves on stage. I used to wear driving gloves because they fit with the whole, I guess, image. But then, like, I thought, no, this is a bit too much. I'm going to ease off in the gloves. Still keeping the bandana though, because I got a dresser drawer full of them, and they gotta go to use somehow.
Yeah. It was pretty funny. I remember like thinking, oh, this is crazy. And I think you did 5 minutes, right? Something like that. I did. Yeah, it was good. It was awesome, man. Well, hey man, I want to thank you so much for like coming on and doing this. This is really cool. This is I gotta be honest, this is one of my favorite talks with another comedian, just because I feel like we were able to cover a lot of things that I think people find interesting. So appreciate you taking the time. And you hitting any mics tonight?
You know it.
All right.
The grind never stops.
Yeah. I don't think I can make it tonight, but I think I'll be out Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. I'd like to do more, but
whatever time you can put into it comes a long way.
The lady, she's
yeah.
No, just kidding. Love you, sweetie pie. Yeah, but anyways, thank you so much. This was awesome. And everyone, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I'm going to have a new episode coming out soon that's going to be only available on my Patreon at patreon.com/Jason Seiler. So check that out. I will reveal the artist soon, but he's going to show lots of cool background paintings and stuff like that. So it's going to be pretty cool. So anyways, everyone, thank you so much. And thank you, Kyle.
No
And
problem. Thanks for having me.
until next time, we'll see you later. Let me hit, where's the stop? Where's the stop button?